This short video is an introduction to demand. So we're on unit 2.1 and just looking at demand theory, where we're heading eventually. And we talked earlier, in the introductory sort of units about models in economics. Well, here's a model, supply and demand. And you can see this is what's called a demand curve or a demand schedule, and similarly a supply one here in red. Developed through Adam Smith, who also you came across in those sort of introductory units, the sort of father of classical economics. So the theory of demand stems around the so-called law of demand. And essentially what the law of demand says is that there is a downward slope in demand curve relationship between price and the quantity demanded here. So what you can see on this diagram is that as the price goes up, let's say from here, and there's the level of demand that corresponds to it, and now the price increases to here. What we're going to see is this, what they are going to call a contraction in demand, this movement along the demand curve. As the price has risen, the demand will go down, and vice versa, of course. That's the so-called law of demand. So it's called a law, suggesting that it's a sort of universal truth. And it's a generally accepted relationship between the level of price and the demand. Market demand is just the sum of all the individual demand curves. So we can talk about a market demand curve for a particular commodity. This diagram just shows that movement, the contraction when the price goes up from P3 to P4, demand contracts from Q3 to Q4, and similarly an extension of demand when the price falls from P1 to P2. The demand will extend along the demand curve from Q1 to Q2. Now you might wonder why we don't call these increases and decreases, and it's because we don't want to get things confused with a situation when the demand curve actually physically shifts. So when we talk about an increase in demand, what we mean is that the demand curve has shifted here to the right from D to D1. More is demanded at each and every price, or the demand has fallen from D to D2. That's a decrease in demand. Less is demanded at each and every price. Okay, so just to remind you what's going on, if the price changes, we only ever see a movement along the existing demand curve if the price of the good changes. And if non-price determinants of demand, so-called non-price determinants, if any of those change, we'll see a shift in the demand curve as shown in this diagram. So for our subject guide, we have listed 5 non-price determinants. We've got income, and then we'll make a difference between what's called a normal good and an inferior good. A normal good is one where if your income goes up, your demand will go up. An inferior good is one where if your income goes up, the demand goes down. So income is a key factor, tastes and preferences, and that's often driven by advertising and marketing. Price of complements and substitutes, like related goods. A complement is something that you buy in conjunction with the product. They go together. Substitute is an alternative. So if you buy one, you don't buy the other. Future price expectations and the number of customers. So that makes up our non-price determinants of demand. When you look a bit more closely at something called income elasticity of demand, you'll come across this Engel curve, just introduced here just because we are talking about the relationship between income and demand. So an Engel curve shows the relationship between income along the bottom here and the quantity X of this product X. So here with an essential product, if your income rises, the consumption will grow slower than the increase in income. You'll buy more of it, but you're not going to buy a great deal more. Here, product X is a luxury, so if your income goes up beyond a certain point, you start buying a lot more of these types of luxury goods. And here is this so-called inferior good, whereas if your income goes up, you buy less of the product. For HL, you also need to go a little bit deeper into this law of demand and explain the demand curve. Why is it downward sloping? And there's 2 sort of models or theories of that. One is called the law of diminishing marginal utility, which explains why you'll buy less as the price goes up. And the other is the income and substitution effects of a price change. So you can read through this slide, but also go into that in a little bit more depth as to why the demand curve is downward sloping.